While goal setting is an excellent way to start the new quarter, what's even more important is goal planning, so breaking your goals down into actionable steps that actually get achieved. As you can see, I've already started going through and planning out my goals, breaking them down into the individual steps, but I thought what would be good is showing you that process so that you can do the same for yours. Flipping forward, the goal we're going to be working on here is a stretching goal, so effectively finding a stretching routine that I can do on a regular basis to support flexibility and just general pains and aches that I have. And the first thing that I'm going to want to do is actually just write down what the goal is. When I write the goal down, I try to use language that is fairly typical to me. I don't try and make it particularly fancy or flowery. If you find yourself using that type of language in everyday life, that's totally fine. You are more than welcome to put it in your goal, but really you just want it to be a simple statement that you can remember and that resonates with you. I've worded mine as find a daily stretching routine to support my flexibility and mobility. Goals are much more likely to get done if you have a solid reason behind them, in particular a reason that is kind of for you in the here and now rather than for a later life version of you. While the goals that you're working on may definitely have benefits for future you, finding something for current you to look forward to is usually a lot more powerful. So the next thing I'm going to write down is the why or reason behind this goal. When thinking about my why, I typically like to tie it to a feeling, so either avoiding a feeling I don't want to have or moving towards a feeling that I do want to have. In this case, for my stretching goal, my why is to avoid the pains and aches that I've been experiencing, especially in my back and knees, to improve and then maintain my flexibility and improve my posture, which is also about avoiding pain. The next thing that I like to do is specify the type of goal. We talk more about goal types in my goal setting course, which is also one of my goals for the first quarter, getting that released and accepting participants. This code here tells me the type of goal that it is, and essentially lets me get in the right mindset for the other steps that follow. Now, while this first stuff is pretty much the same for any goal that I tackle, the steps that follow can sometimes change, whether that be in terms of which steps I'm actually doing or which order they get done in. In general though, the steps include figuring out an ideal outcome. So for the time frame that you're working on the goal, what would the best version of the outcome of this goal be? Of course, this very much depends on the time frame for the goal in general, because something long term is going to have a much bigger outcome typically than something that's short term. But after outlining that ideal outcome, we can then start to think about metrics of success. And these are the little steps or kind of like stepping stones, milestones that you're going to hit along the way towards working on your goal. By knowing what they are ahead of time, you can see when you're actually making progress on the goal. Flipping back, another element that might be good to include for the goal is a process map. So backwards mapping from that end outcome and thinking about the steps that we need to take. And then the other two parts are a timeline for the goal. So when are you going to work on what? And the action steps that you want to take. As you can see, this goal here, which is proper launching my website, is using all of those items. Whereas if we flip forward, something like my exercise goal, which is about finding a style of exercise that I actually enjoy, doesn't use all of them. It has the ideal outcome and metrics of success and the actions list, but it doesn't really need a timeline or to be backwards mapped because it's a small enough goal that those things aren't really necessary. For this one though, the first thing we're going to do is put in that ideal outcome. And this is kind of an opportunity to think really big in terms of this goal. Even if it is only a smaller goal, what is the absolute best version of completing this goal? You do still, of course, want to keep it in the confines of what the goal actually is. So for this one, it's all about stretching. I don't want to kind of like overhaul my eating patterns or anything with this goal. But what is the best version of finding a daily stretching routine? In this part, you can think about the timeline, like when you're actually going to hit certain points in achieving the goal. For instance, when do you want to have the goal achieved by? You can think about it in terms of the depth or the breadth of the goal. And depending on the goal, there might be really specific things that you want to accomplish through it. For instance, given my stretching goal is about finding a daily stretching routine, maybe the ideal outcome for this actually involves having a morning and an evening process to it. So not just one stretching session in the day, but little stretching sessions throughout the day. Again, as said, this is our opportunity to think big with this goal, really think about what is the best possible outcome. For this goal, my ideal outcome is very much about ease of doing the stretching routine, making sure it's something I can remember, or maybe it's a guided routine. Also making sure that it doesn't take too long, because if it does take too long, I am going to be more likely to avoid it. It doesn't require any special equipment, and it just kind of leaves me feeling not sore, but well stretched out, which kind of makes sense considering it's a stretching routine. Now as we have the ideal outcome though, we can then start to think about the metrics of success. And this one is written as a checklist so that I can tick those things off as I accomplish them in working on the goal. The number of metrics or milestones that you write on your list, again, is going to depend on the type of goal and also the size of the goal. Considering this one is a smaller one, I don't have too many metrics to write down. And it's also okay if your metrics end up being similar to your action steps. I find that oftentimes certain action steps in my plans kind of indicate or mark certain amounts of progress towards the goal, especially when certain things have to happen before or after other steps. For this goal in particular, I have 4 metrics of success. So stretching focus areas have been identified, or effectively the places in my body that I feel like need the most attention when it comes to stretching. The next metric is having my research stage completed, and then having done a trial run of at least one stretching routine. After that, it's very much going to be a trial and error type thing as I find a routine that works for me. So the next metric or milestone that I'll be hitting is formalizing the routine so that I can take that one forward. As said, after metrics of success, you can start to do things like the process map or possibly a timeline. For this one, as it is a smaller goal, I'm just going to go straight into the action steps. Along with the typical header on this one, I also like to put in a grey line. This is going to act as the header bar for the actions list. When it comes to putting in this header bar, the format of this really again depends on the type of goal. For instance, the exercise goal here, we just have a dot to indicate the task and then a space to write in what the task is. As I complete them, I can just cross them off. But if we flip back to this one, you can see this one has some initials, and these represent different frequencies with which these tasks have to be done. So O means one-off, I only have to do it once, Q for quarterly, C for cyclic, F for fortnightly or bi-weekly, W for weekly, and D for daily. We talked about it in a previous video, but for 2024 and moving forward, I'm going to be doing a different style of planning that doesn't rely on monthlies, so that's what my cyclic is, and rather than thinking about annual things, I'm more so thinking about quarterly time periods. For you, if you like to stick with the idea of yearly, monthly, weekly, and daily, then you could put that on your action steps list, but mine, as seen, is a little bit different. For this goal in particular though, because it's really just about finding the stretching routine rather than implementing it on a daily basis, I'm mainly only going to have one-off tasks to do here, so I'm just going to go in with a dot so that I can cross off that task as it's done, and then a space to specify what the tasks actually are. As said, depending on the goal, especially if the goal is a bigger one, it can be really helpful to do a little backwards map first. By mapping out this kind of process, it helps you identify those action steps just a little bit easier. But because this goal is small, I don't really need one, I can just go and write in the action steps. As I write them in, they definitely do not have to be in order. Essentially, as I have the thoughts, I just write them down onto the page. A lot of the time they do end up roughly in order, mainly because as I start to think about action steps, I think about the ones that naturally come after them. But in this goals journal, I allow myself to be a little bit messy. Things don't have to be in perfect order. Things don't have to be perfectly spelled. They certainly aren't on this page. I really just need to have a place to capture all of those thoughts so that I know that they're recorded. In terms of the planning stages though, once I have that action steps list in, this is pretty much finished. Now all I need to do is actually take action on them. As part of the action taking, I like to go through each of my goals and pull out the steps that I'm going to be doing each cycle or each fortnight, just so that I can then focus on those ones in particular rather than having to come back here and look at every single step. Especially for the goals that are a little bit bigger, which have maybe quite large actions lists. For instance, this goal here, which has an actions list that spans many pages. So each cycle and each fortnight, I just pull out the ones that are actually going to be relevant to that span of time. As I mentioned a couple of times, the goal that we've mapped out here is quite small, so the majority of these tasks will end up on that fortnightly plan, mainly so that I can keep focused on this goal while my motivation is still pretty high to work on it. While this is just one goal planned out, I actually have 8 different goals that I'm going to be working on in the first quarter. And that might seem like quite a lot, but as said, different types of goals need different kind of work. This one and this one are both very small, whereas this one here is more of a long-term goal, and the one before it is more of a kind of mid-sized goal. If you wanted to see more about goal setting using your bullet journaling system, then the playlist we have on screen here is where it's at. That one has all of our previous goal setting related content, which is going to be really helpful for this time of year, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.